Welcome to another episode, Pound for Pound Box Report, episode 198. I'm your host, Michael. Joining me this week, uh, Jacob from the Inscriber, Jacob from Jab Hook, excuse me, Daniel from the Inscriber. What's going on, fellas?
Good evening.
For those who are new, Pound for Pound Box Report, as I say, to start every show, Pound for Pound Box Report, live YouTube show, uh, slash podcast and blog discussing all things boxing. Motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When boxing is bad, we will talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, we will talk about it. If you want to find out all information regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to. P4P Boxing Report. .wordpress.com is the link. You check the right of the page. You can find the pages and channels for Pound for Pound Box Report on Facebook, on G Plus, on YouTube, Twitter, as well as Tumblr. Also, you can check the right of the page. You can find links to where to listen to the show on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Player FM for the folks over in the UK, as well as Mixcloud. Let's get the show started this evening, doing a recap of what was a very good boxing weekend last week. The last episode, we talked about the first semifinal of the World Boxing Super Series Cruiserweight Tournament with Gassiev, not with Gassiev, but with Usyk in his win in a very good fight with Bredas. Uh, this past weekend was the second semifinal featuring Murat Gassiev versus Yunier Dorticos. We talked about it a lot on last week's show. Uh, Gassiev, in a terrific fight, ended up winning the second semifinal, 12th round stoppage over Dorticos in his home country of Russia. Uh, for me, I was a little bit pleasantly surprised by how Gassiev fought. And the reason I say pleasantly surprised because he showed some things that I had not seen before from him in past fights. I love the patience and the professionalism that he fought with. Uh, he showed some skills in there, some really good skills. I love his use of um, the. He showed that he had an educated left hand. I love how he used the left uppercut, follow up left hook, excuse me, left uppercut combination. Whenever he threw that punch, he landed it. He landed shots to the head as well. Dorticos, on the other hand, he came off a bit as one dimensional. And when Gassiev saw that, he stayed patient. He landed he was calculated with his punches. He knew what he could do in there, and he kind of let Dorticos kind of wear himself out, if you will. Uh, as the fight went on, Dorticos took the shots early, but you could see he was beginning to fade a bit, and Gassiev kept coming on and on and on until he basically just wore out Dorticos, and the finish was terrific. So I'll go to you first, Jacob. Your impressions of the fight. Were you surprised about how Gassiev fought in the semifinal? Just your overall impressions of what I felt was a terrific fight, an early candidate for fight of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I had picked Gassiev to win. I had said that I thought Dorticos is more of a kind of based on his past fights, that he was more of a kind of get you out of there faster guy. So, like, that's where he's going to be most dangerous is in the early rounds. And that if Gassiev could, use basically what you said, be patient and, use the ring and move and not, be a sitting duck for the right hands or the power of Dorticos, that he could maybe drown him in the later rounds. And he was able to do that. I was very impressed with the way Gassiev handled Dorticos, but Dorticos was also game. I'm not sure if he's one dimensional yet, because sometimes what happens is these guys, they knock out people early in succession, and so they kind of fall in love with their power, or they think that that's going to be the thing that's going to win them, fight after fight. I still think he has a hell of a chin still, because he took some good shots, and I think he can do a few things differently and still be competitive. But that's, up for him and his team to go back to the drawing board and see, what adjustments they can make when they, do the next fight. Hopefully it's with Breedis. But Gassiev, like you alluded earlier, he could not land that left hand. So Dorticos was very susceptible to that, and that eventually, you can only take so many of those. But good win for Gassiev. I know Usyk was there, so I'm super excited for this finals, and I think hats off to the tournament. It's been they've had some great back to back fights now in the semifinals, which is a rarity sometimes in tournaments. They've been just leaving it all in the ring and really showcasing their skills. So I'm super excited. I think it's going to be a barn burner of a final round, and for the championship, and to also unify, which is another great thing for boxing.
The reason I was saying one dimensional because as the fight progressed, it seemed like Dorticos he was mainly 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, occasional hook to the body, following up the 1-2, but there was limitations in terms of variety of punches. So maybe, and it could be a case, as you were saying, Jacob, that because his power has had such a role in his career, he could basically rely on that and the kind of simple approach, just throw his punches out there, and because he hits so hard, he just expect guys to fall. And in this case, when he hit Gassiev, one, he used very good defense to not get hit fully flushed, and the few times he got hit fully flushed, he was able to take the shots, and maybe that kind of discouraged Dorticos as the fight went along. He was willing, but when you hit guys and they continue to fall throughout your career, and you face a guy that doesn't fall, what's the fallback plan? And in this fight, he didn't seem to have a fallback plan. It proved to be his downfall in the end. I'll go to you, Daniel. Your thoughts of the fight?
It's a very interesting fight as it went on, because you kind of expected Gassiev to be a little more forthcoming, but instead he stayed on the back foot and let Dorticos, for the first half of the fight, dictate the pace. Now, Dorticos did start to do a little bit of body work in the beginning, but he abandoned, unfortunately, early on just to get headshots. And unfortunately, like we mentioned last week, Dorticos is the type of fighter that he needs full extension of his arm to have for the power that he has in his right hand to show. And unfortunately, as much as he was trying to throw it, a good amount of times Gassiev was making a miss, either blocked by the gloves or he made subtle movements to make sure it didn't land. And Gassiev luckily stuck to the game plan, started attacking the body in the early to mid rounds, and started just to wear down Dorticos. Even as he was landing combinations in the 8th and 9th round that you can tell was starting to take an effect, Dorticos kept coming, though. It wasn't until the final round where finally all that axe chopping that Gassiev did paid off.
I would argue it started to pay off in the preceding round because he got shook in that 11th round as well.
Mm-hmm. But it really, really started short because it was a flush shot that Gassiev landed. Like the type of shots that Dorticos kept taking throughout the fight that ultimately dropped him. And you have to give props to Gassiev, because it's one of the things that factored into it was experience. Gassiev has been, at least before this, at least in one 12-round fight. Dorticos never, the closest he got was the 10th round. So it was taken into a territory that he really didn't know before. And it showed, like, he was getting tired. His punches weren't as crisp. There wasn't as much force in the punches. And ultimately, Gassiev did what he was supposed to do. He landed really well. He landed clean uppercuts throughout the fight. That left hook pretty much was an open lane throughout, like Jacob mentioned. Nothing Dorticos did ever was a defensive adjustment to make sure that landed, that missed. But then again, just knowing the game plan of Dorticos, that was by design. And unfortunately, that's a bad design. You can do 1-2s all you want in a fight like that, but when you know a guy that is multifaceted as Gassiev is, he's a cruiserweight that tends to, he's a cruiserweight because of the guy he trains with, Triple G, that fights a lot like a middleweight. So he's got a little bit more variance to his arsenal. And Dorticos, I don't think really counted on that. Ultimately, though, this was a fight that you can pretty much say there are no losers in a way. Gassiev obviously is the winner. He has 2 belts now because the WBA made Dorticos the full champion and made Ledebev like a champion in recess. But now you know you want to watch Dorticos in the next fight. Like him and Breeders, like Jacob mentioned, would be an excellent fight. Him and Ledebev might be a pretty good fight. So the doors are open, and you can tell that it probably did a lot more good than bad for Dorticos in the long run. Because you know that guy can try to go the distance, and if he just adds a little bit more variance, he can become a pretty tough out.
And did you guys see after also, I think Gassiev went to Dorticos' dressing room and gave him back the belt, I think.
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. And even at the press conference, he consoled Dorticos, which is a great thing. This is what sports is all about, sportsmanship. I really like this attitude of you can hype up a fight and all that stuff, but when there's like too much animosity and whatnot, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a sport. It's a challenge, and my hat's off to both guys. I mean, they carried themselves well, and I agree. I agree with you, Mike, that in this fight, Dorticos did look one-dimensional, but I do think he has other aspects of his game. Just he needs to work with his team, and then to Daniel's point, there's plenty of fights. He came out, he didn't get totally ruined. It was, in my opinion, I mean, there were some close rounds, and he did a good standing, but if he makes some adjustments, I mean, he's a tough out for anybody. And there's a bunch of different fights you can make within this tournament, or even people outside the cruiserweight that would be exciting.
Yeah. In short, in spite of his loss, just like Brady's last week, in spite of his loss, he is still a relevant guy in that division with plenty of fights for him. Now, I will say last week that I predicted. I felt Dorticos would win. I just thought that the power would show over time, but you could tell when Gassiev was when you saw in the first half of the fight how adept Gassiev was and how low-key slick he was defensively in terms of parrying the shots, blocking the shots, and even when he got hit, taking power. And then when again, as I said earlier, the subtle skill that he displayed, I was thinking to myself, okay, I may walk away with this with some egg on my face. So I will take that L, but you have to give Gassiev credit for what the skill that he displayed from an offensive and defensive perspective. Moving forward, he fights Usyk in the finals. I can't remember the exact date of the final.
May 11th.
I think, May 11th. There you go. Thank you, Daniel. The question is, for both of you gentlemen, is Gassiev has had a reputation as a guy who comes forward a lot, fights on the front foot a lot. But in this fight with Dorticos, he employed a different strategy against a fighter like Usyk, who even in the win against Brady's shows some vulnerability. Got exposed a little bit what strategy do you think? Um, what strategy do you think Gassiev uh, would employ versus Usyk in the final in May?
That one's a complicated one to do because one of the things that makes it complicated is the fact that Usyk could pretty much fight him almost the same way Dorticos did, but he has more variance to his arsenal because luckily he's been trained like by for the most part by Papa Lomachenko. But the thing is, he knows now that he can't let Gassiev land those left hooks. Because with Dorticos he landed them with ease. Usyk can't really let him land on that, but he is pretty well conditioned. He could go 12 rounds. So that game plan of not really fighting in the beginning of the fight, letting Dorticos tire himself out while working the body, that may not work against Usyk. Usyk's conditioned enough where he can do 12 rounds and he can do a lot of lateral movement. The point is, Gassiev has to probably be very, very patient. And just as Usyk was landing those leaky left uppercuts against Briedis, he has to do the same. He has to find that little comfort zone inside where he can hurt Usyk at the same time. Don't let Usyk counter as fast as he can.
Your thoughts, Jacob?
I agree with Daniel. This is a tough one to, because I do think Usyk is very skilled, and I know a lot of people had the previous fight with Briedis a lot closer than I did, but I think Gassiev, he's gonna have to maybe study the film and look at the things that Briedis or other opponents have been able to do to Usyk. I think he has to start fast, and I do think putting pressure on Usyk is the right thing to do. I don't think moving backwards is going to help. Usyk has a pretty good jab, and he fights well going forward, but I'm not sure that he's as good going backwards. So I would say that he'd have to do more of that, and definitely invest in the body like he did in this fight with Dorticos. I mean that's boxing 101. Chop down the body, the head will follow, and give you opportunities. But I played it. Gassiev has to play to his strengths. Like don't let Usyk dictate the fight. Make sure that they have a backup plan B if the plan A isn't going right. So him and Abel Sanchez, make sure you have something else that you can offer or a different, strategy, because Usyk, I think, is a cerebral fighter, but I don't think he's invincible. So it's definitely a winnable fight. I couldn't make a pick right now, but it should be a really good fight.
Let's move on to Texas, Corpus Christi to be exact, and the kind of doubleheader, if you will, on ESPN that took place Saturday night. Main event was Gilberto Ramirez versus Habib Ahmed. Ramirez scoring a 6-round TKO. Jerwin Ancajas on the undercard fighting Israel Gonzalez. Ancajas scoring a 10th-round TKO. I want to start with Ancajas first. I'll go to you, Daniel. Ancajas, look, let me say this beforehand. Ancajas, young upstart, looked very good. A lot of skill. He can pop too. You can tell he can pop by the way he finished the fight. That powerful left that didn't even land flush on the chin, let it on the forehead, but it put Gonzalez down, and that was it. Uh, uh, and Kanye scored an earlier knockdown, I believe, in round 1 as well. But let me say beforehand, I need for boxing fans and whoever to stop the comparison, trying to compare this guy with Ancajas with Manny Pacquiao, because I guess people look at him and say, oh, because he's Filipino, uh, because he's a southpaw, because he shows power,
Hmm.
and because he's humble, automatically you want to make a comparison to Manny Pacquiao. No, these guys fight two different styles. Ancajas is way more patient than Pacquiao than the young Pacquiao was. Um, I think he exhibit more skill in terms of jab, better jab, greater variety of punches than the younger Pacquiao. Um, so yeah, let's talk about the fight itself and how he looked against Gonzalez. But let's also talk about this comparison that people want to keep putting on Kanye's with Manny Pacquiao.
Well, I did miss the fight a little in when it went live because unfortunately I was in a ferry going to Connecticut. But luckily I was able to catch the highlights in the meantime. And Arcanius, yeah, worked really well. He did a good variable punches. You know he has a good left hand. You know he has a good foundation to base off in. And he's in a perfect division to showcase those skills at super flyweight. The problem, though, is much like in Puerto Rico, they're still trying to find the next Tito, somebody that can connect with fans, with their countrymen the way that Tito did. Even though Miguel Cotto was very successful in that as well, the Philippines are doing the same thing with Manny. They want to find somebody that is the next Manny. The problem is one of the things that made Manny so good is he was just so naturally gifted with speed in his hands
and feet.
Mm-hmm. So his overall speed did hide a little bit of the not so polished, you can say, foundation of skills that he had early on and as he moved up in weight. Arcanius actually has like you mentioned, has a much better foundation as far as a skill set. He doesn't have the overall speed of Manny, so it's very unfair to really, really compare them to, but that's the main issue, unfortunately, with the Philippines. And on top of that, it's like I say, he signed with Top Rank. On top of that, he went to the wild card gym. So the comparisons are almost inviting themselves to come in, but it's gonna be very tough because before Manny, there were some good Filipino fighters, but none of them resonated with as big of an audience as Manny Pacquiao did. So I don't really blame like the Filipino people or maybe even Top Rank to try to catch lightning in the bottle twice, but that's very rare. It's very, very rare to do. Even among with countries that have really, really solid fighting traditions, like even Mexico right now, like you can't even say, even at this stage, Canelo can say that he's reached the plateau that Julio Cesar Chavez did. Even later on in this career, Chavez. And was a very few of their young guys, with the possible exception of Luis Neri, can probably capture a lot of the luster that we had with Barrera, Morales, and Marquez when they weren't at those weights. So the comparisons are always going to happen. It's just mainly the Philippines. It struck so rapidly the way Manny did, and the connection with Manny was so much. It was the perfect storm with Manny. Had a young kid, was given a chance on HBO, and he came in with a trainer that was likable. Probably the closest thing as far as likability to Mickey in the Rocky movies. And they're just trying to capture it again. And it's unfair to Ancajas in a way, and it's unfair to a lot of Filipino fighters, but it says not just in boxing, it's in sports in general. Like this conversation we're having with Manny Ancajas, we can have it with Michael Jordan and LeBron, or early LeBron, not this version of LeBron James, early LeBron, like the LeBron before he won the championships.
I'll go to you, Jacob. For me, again, in short, because Manny was so fast and hit so hard when he was young, he was more explosive. He was more dynamic. But I look at Ancanas and how he fights. To me, he's more sound. He's more technical. Um, he does more at this stage of his career than Manny did at a similar stage of his career. So, talk about the comparison and talk about his performance last week against Gonzalez, Jacob.
Daniel really hit it on the head there. There's always going to be the comparisons, especially when you're talking about the nationality aspect of it. The first thing I thought of was the Puerto Rico thing that he brought up with the, Tito and Cotto, and then even what's the guy that got in the motorcycle accident? The new
Verdejo.
Yeah. So I mean, it happens, and with the Manny was able to put a spotlight on the Philippines in a different way, because he was coming up in weight, and I think he did eight weight classes he won championships in, but it was the type of opponents that he ended up fighting. These were all the who's who as far as the names that were in the sport. So he was on the big stage. I think that they're both guys are completely different type of fighters. But again, like Daniel stated, there's going to be that natural inclination to compare him to Manny Pacquiao, or when are we going to get the next Manny Pacquiao, or when are we going to get the next Floyd Mayweather, when are we going to get the next Chavez? I mean, those things are always going to be part of boxing. That what should happen is that these boxers should just try to be themselves and just be the best version of themselves, and not buy into, hey, I'm the next Manny Pacquiao or whatever. But that's a hard thing to do, because you got all these organizations around you, and people telling you all these things, and sometimes you start to believe it. But I thought the performance as well was good. I thought he does definitely have some skills. I would like to see him step up his competition, and the super flyweight division is on fire, and we have the super fly 2 coming up here at the end of February, a couple weeks, I think, and there's going to be some meaningful fights on that card. So if he can get maybe either the winners or the losers of some of these fights, I think that would be good to see kind of where he stands, because at this point, I would say, I'm trying to think. So at this point, I mean, Manny in his career, I mean, he kind of had a little stumble when he ran into Eric Morales the first time, but then he kind of recovered from that and then went on this tear. But I mean, you can't really compare resumes, because they're at different stages right now. So I definitely want to see him again. I thought it was a good performance. He got the job done, but hopefully he can get some more meaningful fights and get in the mix of super.
My question to you, Daniel, is kind of gonna piggyback off of what Jacob just said about Ancanas. Looking at the 115 mix, first of all, I have to say that it looks like that Ancanas is going to fight his mandatory next. I think a guy by the name of Sultan, also from the Philippines, so it could be all Philippine showdown, possibly in the Philippines. But Ancanas, who is promoted by Pacquiao, also has a deal with Bob Arum. So Arum has some plans for him. Looking at the 115 mix with Superfly 2, you don't know what Anu is going to do. He says he's going to move up to 118. You don't know how soon that's going to happen. You got Fly out there as well. Where does he fit in that mix? A, B, where do you think he goes? Let's just say he fights the mandatory and wins that. Where do you think he goes from there?
As far as where he stands, he's probably right now above Yafai. He does have the skill set to do it, and unfortunately, Yafai really hasn't fought that much since getting that title. The tricky part is I can't put him over Rambisai right now because Rambisai beat the man in Chocolatito. And he might lose to Estrada. Quadras presents a different little mix because he's a bigger guy for that division. The Arroyo twins present a different variation depending on which twin, McWilliams or McJoe.
And Quadros is fighting one of them.
Yep. McJoe, I think. No. No, it's McWilliams. I think it's McWilliams. But that's an interesting fit. As far as where he goes next, that depends a lot on what Manny's gonna do. Because with this rumbling that there's about to be an ESPN pay-per-view for boxing involving Manny Pacquiao, depending on how long it takes, maybe you put Ancajas on that undercard. Try to build it up even more. The question is going to be, though, is who's going to be making most of the decisions? Is it going to be Manny or is it going to be Bob? Because if it's Manny it might be a little bit difficult because obviously he's a senator in the Philippines, so his plate's pretty full. So Bob has a little bit more time, but we know Bob doesn't really like to play well with others unless he gets a sizable part of the pie. So that's going to be difficult to do it in because, well, obviously he has to deal with an Asian promoter in Rong Visai who might just, after this fight, depending on what happens, might just keep him in Thailand for a bit. I think Estrada's promoted by Zanford. So that's an easier fight to make. Bob Arum and Zanford Promotions, they've gotten along really well. So it mainly depends on who is holding the belts at the end of Superfly. And if Inoue doesn't go up now to bantamweight, that's an interesting fight considering Inoue's contract pretty much mandates he either fights a champion or fights to become a mandatory for a champion.
But the problem is they offered a fight. Inoue offered Ancajas a fight, and Bob Arum said no.
That's the whole thing. It depends on who does Bob want to play ball with, and what options did he give him? And like I said, and who's in charge? Who's actually in charge of Ancajas? Is it going to be Bob or is it going to be Manny? And we kind of know that Bob and Manny's relationship hasn't exactly been roses lately.
Are they going to put Crawford as the co-main event on that?
Basically, Crawford,
that's dirty.
And
that's dirty, man.
On undercard. Like I was saying when I first heard about this, how have the mighty have fallen? Pacquiao on the undercard of Crawford Horn or Horn Crawford.
No, I thought they were going to put Manny as the main card and Crawford as the co.
No, you can't do it. You can't do it considering where they want to put this fight. They want to put this fight at Madison Square Garden.
No, I think Crawford should be the main event. I hope they don't do him dirty like that, and because Manny is like Manny.
Yeah, the bad part about it is this is Manny's first time in Madison Square Garden. It's way too late for you to start rebuilding the New York fan base at this stage. And especially now that we know Crawford has a couple of fights already under his belt in the Garden, so he does have a fan base here. So I think they might just put Manny on the undercard just as something, okay, we got to sell tickets and have Bud be the main event. It also may depend on who Manny's fighting, because obviously Mike Alvarado's in the running. And we know, like we mentioned with Bob does like to keep things in house. But there is the small possibility of Lucas Matisse.
Yeah.
It mainly depends on what Freddie does, because we know at the end Freddie Roach wants to delay a fight with Bud for Manny as much as he can.
That fight's not going to happen. Manny's not going to fight Bud. He's not. He'll fight Lomachenko before he fights Bud. He'll fight Lomachenko before he fights Bud. That's my prediction. Let's move on to the main event of that Corpus Christi card. I mean, look, last week we talked about this fight with Gilberto Ramirez versus Habib Ahmed. None of us had really ever seen any footage of Ahmed. Ramirez did what he had to do, stopped him in 6. Ahmed, look, he wasn't garbage, but let's put it this way. He wasn't on the level of a championship quality caliber fighter. And for me, in watching the fight and watching the commentary on ESPN, my problem is don't give someone extra credit for doing what you're supposed to do. He was in there against an inferior opponent. He looked good against an inferior opponent, and he stopped an inferior opponent. Don't use that to hype this guy as being just the next breed, the next level, like he's so special, because we still don't know yet. And I'm not going to give him bonus points based on this fight, based on this performance, because of the opponent he was in there in the ring against. I go to you, Jacob. Your thoughts?
You know, Gilberto Ramirez he's kind of an anomaly. Sometimes I think he has the skills to be able to do some great things, but then he doesn't really, unfortunately, fight, or he has close fights when he really shouldn't. And I know Daniel has been talking about it for a long time. I mean, I think the only real notable win he's had of recent was against Abraham, but that's a faded Abraham. I know he's talking about fighting, the winners of the tournament and whatnot, but I mean, I don't know how many of those fights are actually makeable. And we've been down this path before when people talk about the fights that they want, but it's really, what are the fights that can be made? After all the red tape, you go through all the red tape. But he got the job done. I'm not so sure that the opposition was, top notch. And for me, I mean, still sharp and still. So if you want to get better, you got to get better competition, and you got to be in the ring more often. So I don't know. If I was any other super middleweight, I'd be wanting to fight him, because he might be ripe for the picking.
I'll go to you, Daniel. Am I being too hypercritical here? I want to give Ramirez credit for the win and doing what he had to do, but at the same time, I need some of the folks, mainly the announcers that was covering the fight, to stop with the hyperbole in terms of praising this guy. Don't convince me that he's that dude yet in this division based on this win.
Oh, where to begin? First off, this fight was in Texas, so I knew Lawrence Cole was going to be involved.
Yeah.
That refereeing was god awful. That fight should have ended at least 1 or 2 rounds sooner.
I mean, Ahmed's corner basically did what Lawrence Cole should have done but refused to do.
Yeah.
Stop the doggone fight.
Yeah, that's my whole thing with Lawrence Cole. And again, folks, that's the reason why Lawrence Cole, you don't hear his name outside of Texas. Nobody in their right mind outside of Texas is going to put that man as referee of a headline fight. Even when he does a semi-competent job like he did with Maidana Broner. But the thing, unfortunately, with Zurdo, and like I said, he did what he was supposed to do. That's the whole thing. He did what he was supposed to do. And if Gail was here, she would mention, like she mentioned in my show yesterday, that there are a lot of positive attributes to Zurdo. Like he's young, he's charismatic, he's taken the time to learn English, so he can speak it very fluently. He has a charming personality. The problem of it, that doesn't translate a lot to what's happening in the ring. And it's that hammer I keep hitting, like Jacob mentioned, it's a hammer I keep hitting. It feels like he does fight to the level of his competition at times. And that just turns out lackluster performances. And this one was decent. It's not a masterpiece. And it didn't do something that I wanted to know at the end of the fight. The main question I had at the end of the fight, and I wanted to have it in the fight, was, did Zurdo do enough that you can go and say to the winner of the World Boxing Super Middleweight Tournament, you're not the man, you need to see Zurdo? That didn't do it. This fight didn't do it.
Absolutely not. He did not do enough to claim that mantle.
Nope. And that leaves, and this division right now is wide open. Because obviously in that tournament, only two belts, you're only going to be unifying two belts. The other two are with Zurdo and with David Benavidez. And Benavidez actually has a chance to make himself that dude in a rematch with Gav.
Right. We were talking Benavidez, people in boxing social media, and I think some from even Ramirez mentioned Benavidez after the fight, but still, the division is unsettled at this point with the Gales, his loss, Baldu Jack moving up to fight Stevenson. You got the super middleweight tournament. You don't know who is the guy. No consensus in terms of who's the best in that division. So you just don't know.
Yeah.
So again, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, the thing is, it's a top-ranked fight. I do expect a little bit of hype job when it comes to the announcing team, but that was a little bit too much. Now, granted, I get it. I get what Bob's trying to do. Bob's been trying to tell everybody that despite the fact that I think he's older than Canelo by a couple of years, I may be wrong, but even though I think he's older than Canelo, he's trying to say he's the next Canelo. Okay, you have the charm, you have the personality. Like I said, you already have the language barrier down, something that Canelo still doesn't really have. But at the same time, Canelo has built up a better resume. And he's done improvements throughout his career.
He's younger.
Yeah, he's young. I know Canelo's young. Wait,
Zurdo's younger? No. Zurdo's 26, Canelo's 27.
Okay, so they're almost by a year. Okay.
Yeah.
But either way, a year. And there's a still wide gap of difference. That's the whole problem. Canelo has improved in his fights going into it. Obviously, like the same Canelo that lost to Floyd is not the same Canelo that fought Golovkin. With Zurdo, we don't know. That's the problem. I hoped that the Zurdo that I saw with Abraham would be it, but it keeps regressing and gets into a point where it almost feels like you have to try to make a unification fight just to see if this kid actually has it or not.
Okay. I want want to move over to Japan. Uh, and talk about a fighter that we failed to mention that we didn't talk about last week. Daigo Higa, current champion at 112 WBC version. I want to give first a shout out to 2K and the folks over at Three Kings Boxing. I wrote a kind of post-fight recap of this fight between Higa and Moises Fuentes. Higa blasted Fuentes out there in the first round, hurt him kind of halfway through the bout. Onslaught, which concluded with a right hand body shot, put Fuentes down. He got up, but the referee stopped the fight and said no more. If you guys saw the fight, not only talk about what you briefly saw in that first round, but your thoughts. What's your impressions of Daigo Higa?
That's a mean little dude. That's what you're gonna say. That's a mean little dude with that knockout power. And he's like I said, he's getting close to the division you want to be a mean little dude in. Like 112 pounds, he can go to 115 if he chooses to. And that presents, like I said, interesting scenarios. But yeah, that's a mean little dude. Like it now, it would take a couple of years, and it would take Neary to stay at bantamweight. I wouldn't mind seeing in a couple of years Higa versus Neary at bantamweight. One mean Japanese versus one mean Mexican. Just pass me the popcorn.
Indeed. Again, shout out to 2K, C-Bone, the folks over at Three Kings Boxing. You can check out my article over on threekingsboxing.com. I'll go to you, Jacob. I'll give a little brief since you mentioned of the future of Higa, since Daniel was talking about it with his breakdown. Higa is already, from what I understand and from my sources over at Asian Boxing, he's having some issues, some difficulties already at this early stage of his career, making 112, and anticipate him moving up to 115 as early as next year. In terms of his immediate future, I expect to see him in the States, not necessarily fighting, but he will be ringside, Jacob, for Super Flyweight 2. And it seems to be their early seeds being planted for him, uh, much like Anui, what we saw last year. There seems to be early seeds planting to possibly see Higa in the United States. Your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, I didn't catch this fight, so I can't. I need to go and watch it. But I mean, if he is going to be in the house, and I mean, to me, that's everything but good. You know, these guys, that go to these other, go see whoever's the winner of the fights, and get in the mix. I mean, I think that's a good way to approach it. If you're trying to get fights, kind of like Inouye did, he was able to fight in the States, make his debut and do a good job of it. So, Higa being, most of his fights being in Japan, it'd be good to get that exposure here in the States. All he has to do is get on, a televised undercard, and especially like a show like Superfly, which this upcoming card is actually pretty stacked. I think Nientes is also fighting on that undercard,
Yes.
which is interesting. But you got two main fights, and then you got Hawaiian Punch is going to be on there, and then Nientes. So getting over here to the States, I mean, the United States is still a big market, and I think there's ways to negotiate getting on some of these cards and these shows and just getting yourself out there. So, that's nothing but good news, in my opinion.
Shout out to Gus, who's in the chat right now. Gus from Corruption and Boxing. Shout out to Miss Vicious Fox. Also, she's in the chat right now. They're chopping it up. He was saying about Ramirez. She says, "Nah, he ain't the man yet." I agree with him. Then she also says she has more faith in Benitez to be that dude in 168 pounds more than Gilberto Ramirez. Wasn't going to talk about news because it wasn't really that much news going on, but brief little thing here we could talk about. Looks like Joshua and Parker is going to be aired on Showtime. Quickly, fellas, your thoughts on that?
Not surprised. I'm glad Showtime's getting it actually because I feel like Showtime's investing more in boxing and they're doing more for the sport than HBO has been doing. So, they should get rewarded for that. So, get a big fight like this one, a unification fight again, and hopefully we can see Deontay Wilder and the winner of this fight in the future. And Deontay Wilder is a Showtime guy too. So not much more to add to that, but I'm glad they're getting it.
Your thoughts, Daniel? Not only talk about that, but also this kind of discussion that I've been hearing popping up about Joshua. I think Wilder said something to the effect that Joshua, he's unknown here in the States, and Amir Khan was reportedly stated that Joshua needs to fight in the U.S., if you will, and if you want to maximize his full potential. So, talk about the fact that you're going to see Joshua Parker on Showtime, as well as this chatter I'm hearing about how Joshua essentially needs to come stateside.
Well, as far as Showtime, it was going to be a given. The only thing was that were they going to do a recording or were they going to do it live? And they're going to do it live. So there's a good chance that they're going to fly. They'll likely fly Morrow, Paulie, and Al there to commentate. It doesn't leave Morrow a lot of time because he has NXT Takeover in New Orleans the week afterwards.
Well, that's they can do. I mean, they've done Joshua's bouts in studio.
Yeah,
when he won the title, he did in studio. And also when they fought Brazil, they did in studio as well. They just had
they had Sky Sports do the commentary, but I think they've reached a stage where they have to go. They have to go, especially when HBO, they maybe not be putting much boxing because they may be trying to position themselves to make a major bid on Joshua on a multi-fight deal for this year. That's one thing. The other thing when it comes to it, this is something that Eddie Hearn opened himself up for when he tried to, in a way, embarrass Wilder. Because obviously we know negotiation. We know Wilder's been demanding 50-50 split. So in the first Danny Jacobs fight, that on the Matchroom, Eddie Hearn tried to embarrass Deontay Wilder by asking people in New York if they knew who Deontay Wilder was. Not a lot of people knew it. And he thought, oh, they'll know my guy. Who's Anthony Joshua? And then he got a rude awakening. He said, not many people know Anthony Joshua either here. And ultimately, when they asked the question of boxing, who do you know in boxing? Most people mention Floyd, Manny, and Canelo. So he's technically right in that aspect. That to the casual person, the casual sports fan, Anthony Joshua is an unknown commodity here in the U.S. What Khan's saying is understandable because Joshua at this stage built up his career a bit better than Khan did when he stepped into the States. And there's also the fact that you don't want to be known as the guy that only fights in your country. Like it got to a certain point when it came to Arthur Abraham that you didn't like it because you knew, okay, if it's an Arthur Abraham fight, he won't leave Germany. Like, why not with Adonis Stevenson? Now, granted, there's legal issues because of it. His prior convictions, we know Adonis Stevenson won't fight outside Canada. We know for a while Anthony Mundine didn't fight outside Australia.
He doesn't deserve it. He don't mention his name in this discussion. He doesn't deserve it.
No, I don't mean as far as prestige. I just mean in the way people know that, oh, that guy only fights in this country.
I'm saying that because the dude is not even a world champ. He was never a world champion, Mundine.
I know. But that's what Joshua has to prevent in many ways. That's what I think Khan's trying to get into. You don't want to be known as the guy that, oh, you're a superstar, you're selling out stadiums, but you're only selling them out in your country. They're selling it out because you know you're there. And like the supposed, I don't know if it's true or not. Like I said, my British people can, like, if Gus is in the chat, he can let us elaborate more. But supposedly, the drug testing in the UK is a little bit more lax than in the US. And there have been, not so much by Wilder, but I think Fury himself has thrown those accusations at Joshua. So I get why Khan's saying that it needs to come to the US, but again, that's one side to look at it when you're saying he needs to come to the US because not a lot of people know you. The other side, we mentioned it, financially, he doesn't have to.
No, he doesn't.
Like, financially, he can stand pat and make money unless he loses. And I think that's probably the danger that Khan's seen. Khan was not gonna be as big of a commodity because he lost in the UK in that fight with Prescott. Not only lost, we know that was a brutal knockout.
In the first round, I think.
Yep. And that technically ruined Khan in many ways as far as him coming to the US when he did. So maybe Khan's saying, like, you know what, before that happens, come to the US, build up your name, and if a loss happens in the US, you can pretty much just say, oh, I'm not used to America. It's just because I wasn't used to America yet. Kind of like I think or he didn't take it seriously, like what Lennox Lewis did with Arthur McCall, in a way.
That's weak, though.
It's weak, yeah, and it's a faulty argument, but that's the only thing I can think of from Khan saying, like, you need to come here because financially, we mentioned.
I could compare it to Hamed, who was an established star in the UK. He was a multimillionaire before the Kelvin Kelly fight, but he had a desire to fight in the US, and he did, and it proved to be a success, not just in the ring, but outside of the ring, because HBO invested in him. So I can see from that vantage point, but even then, even that's pushing it a bit because Anthony Joshua is just a different entity. The power dynamic is such different because he's a heavyweight. Because there's even more financial investment in him than there was in Hamed. So even more in the case with Joshua, would you like it? Yeah. Would you like for him to come to fight in the U.S.? Yeah. But to your point, Daniel, does he really necessarily have to? Particularly because he's such a cash cow, he could bring those guys there.
That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. Eventually, like I said, I think he will come to the U.S. at a certain point. because it just naturally happens. Like Lennox Lewis eventually came here, so it's bound to happen. It's just the timing has to be good. Like right now, he doesn't need to. Like if they can, if somehow they scrap, if both Joshua and Wilder scrap their fights and they decide, no, we're going to fight each other, we know it's going to be the UK.
Right. Let's move on because this is going to be a short show. Only one real fight of note happening this weekend. Miguel Berchelt defending his junior lightweight battle against a guy by the name of Awuku. Going to happen in Cancun. I'm gonna rely on you guys here because I don't know much about Berchelt's opponent. So, any breakdown in terms of this fight with Berchelt?
Well, I think it's his third different opponent. You know, he was supposed to fight. I can't remember who he was supposed to fight, but then that fell through. Then he got another opponent, and that fell through, and so now it's this guy. So, and I believe he's fighting in close to his hometown in Mexico. So I don't know too much about him. I mean, it seems like this is like a stay busy fight, and hopefully we get to see a fight with Berchelt because I do like Berchelt. See him fight, one of the top guys. I know the Lomo fight has been talked about before, but I don't know how realistic that is. But these are also dangerous fights, though, when you don't know as much about the opponent, or maybe you're thinking it's going to be a cakewalk. All it takes is for a guy to be super motivated, and he gets you on a when you're kind of sleeping, and takes that belt away from you. So I hope Berchelt comes prepared. I hope he does his work and doesn't get injured, and we can see him fight soon.
Your thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, this is a stay busy fight. This is his first fight coming back from that hand injury, so it's a little bit of a gimme. Awuku, he fights in Ghana, so he's going to try to stay there, keep the pace, and he's already proclaimed that he will knock out Berchelt because he made a mistake in picking me. But at the same time, it is more like a stay busy fight. It's something to get Berchelt going again because obviously, if you're doing 130 pounds, the Loma fights is the big cheese that you want to get, and you don't want to risk anything to it, and it'll be fun. And actually, interestingly, there's another fight happening, not in Cancun, but in Juarez, which might present a future opponent for Berchelt pretty soon. Miguel Roman.
That's right. I forgot about that. So, yeah. I mean, look. Speaking of Loma, where do you think he's going? Where do you think he's going next? You heard all the hubbub about him fighting possibly Linares, April, May. Linares tweeted today that it's a funny little tweet with him holding a telephone. Basically said no phone call from Team Loma yet. I mentioned that I think all roads are eventually going to lead to him fighting Manny at the end of the year. So quickly,
Lomo.
I'm saying it. I'm predicting it. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if he fought Manny because I'm saying Freddie don't want him in the ring with Bud. He don't.
Yeah, but I don't. Does that mean he has to be in the ring with Lomo though, just because he doesn't want to be in the ring with Bud?
And where else Manny going to go if he's going to continue to fight?
Manny's career, his legacy is cemented. He doesn't have to do shit. He's still going to make money, and he doesn't have to prove anything. So,
but this is Bob Aaron we're talking about here. Everybody knows he's going to squeeze one more big fight out of Manny before he calls it a day and dumps him.
Yeah, but we've been saying that for a long time. I mean, I think even Daniel was alluding, a year or 2 years ago that we're going to see a Mayweather Manny Pacquiao fight. But I don't think that fight's gonna ever happen. I think they thought that he was gonna beat Horn. I mean, I personally thought he beat Horn, but whatever. They were looking at the rematch. It. I think Manny was retired not that long ago, and I understand that Bob wants to squeeze something out of him, but I don't know that Manny's going to sign up for that. He's got his other responsibilities, and he doesn't really have to take risk anymore, in my opinion.
It's not so much the risk is. I don't think Manny minds too much of the risk. It's just the main factor of one. It's Bob, so his MO is always trying to be like, okay, whichever one is going to be my next guy, I want my old top guy to lose to. It's kind of like wrestling. Like, I think there's a rule in pro wrestling where in your last match, if you're like a big legend, you lose to get the next guy, to give the guy that you lose to, say he's the next star. Bob does the same thing. He did it with Manny. He did it with Manny and Floyd against Oscar. The problem, though, is number one, there's enough people in Manny's circle that are onto Bob's bullshit. And Manny's ego actually might get in the way too. Manny might just say, I want to retire, but I want to retire on a win. Obviously, that didn't happen with Horn. And then he pretty much sabotaged our negotiations by trying to say, I know I agreed to a rematch in Australia, but I actually wanted the Philippines. And it's just going to depend on what he ultimately does. Loma, it's the closest way he can do it. And Manny is small enough where making lightweight is not out of the question.
Nope. Or even a catchweight, say, 138.
And, well, we know that Lomachenko can go up to junior welterweight. He did it to Rigondeaux. So we know he can do it. The problem, though, is which you're going to have to pick your poison if you're Freddie. Do you either A, get into a guy against Lomachenko, a guy who, as fast as Manny is, at this stage of the game, does not have the footwork of Lomachenko. But it's not much of a risk as far as you being knocked out. Or do you go with Bud where your hands might be faster, you might have better feet, but Bud might knock you out?
Bud probably will knock him out. I mean, Manny did not look good in that Horn fight.
For me, Bud is going to knock him out.
Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing. Freddie Roach has to pick the poison there. And Lomachenko is right now. If the ultimate goal for Freddie is, I do not want to see Manny get knocked out by Bud Crawford, that's the biggest fight you can make outside of Manny Linares. Or if Bob Arum really wants to bite his tongue, Manny Mikey. There's not a lot out there. Unfortunately,
well, Mikey, that's another scenario right there in terms of who he wants to fight. Let's just say the obvious fight for him is out there. We all know who it is. It's a damn shame he's not fighting that fight and talking out of both sides of his what. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah, but it illustrates the thing. There's not a lot of options for Manny at this stage of his career. If you're want him to get a big payday, and B, want to have him in a fight that he does have a good chance of winning. Because I mentioned outside of Bud and Lomachenko, those are fights a Top Rank can make. Outside of the welterweight division, Keith Keith Thurman might be a decent challenge. Danny Garcia, he could probably beat Danny Garcia.
Keith Thurman, the guy won't even fight. The guy's injured all the time. He won't even fight his fucking mandatory. Yeah. Fuck that guy.
No, there's that point. But at the end of the day, if you're gonna talk about the other guys on the other side, if that option it opens up, then at that point I say no. Sorry, Keith, no.
I mean, look, man.
Sit down.
Thurman would take the fight because of the money, but let's face it, just like Mikey Garcia, we know the fight out there for boxing's on the barge. Fight him.
Yeah. Oh no, we
Thurman's gonna get carpal tunnel from playing the fucking flute. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, but that's the thing. If they said if that door opens for Manny, the only fight I want then is Spence. And if Freddie Roach doesn't want him to fight Bud, we know damn well he doesn't want to face Spence.
Spence is too big for him. Spence might kill him.
That's the whole point. Yeah, that's leading a lamb to slaughter at this stage with Manny Pacquiao versus Errol Spence. An Errol Spence, too, that has a mean streak going with him right now. We saw the look that he gave to Keith Thurman in that press conference. All we needed was for Bishop from Juice to show up.
Yup. Yep. And I think we're going to start to shut things down. On that note, you want to give one last word, Jacob?
No, but that Thurman shit was funny because that guy ain't fighting nobody. I'm done with the Thurman and his antics. But no, I mean, I still think that at the end of the day, I know that everybody's trying to get paid and all that stuff, but the fighter has to make the decision at the end of the day. You know, he's going to get advice from everybody, but, you know, they have to look within themselves and say, hey, is this something I want to do or, you know, maybe not, you know? So, you know, I don't know if we'll see it. You know, it might be ugly if we do see it, but we'll see.
And I think we're going to shut things down on that note. So short show this evening. Going around hang out here around the panel. Starting with you, Jacob. Jacob from Jab Hook. For folks who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk movies as well, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me on the show. And it's always good talking with you guys. And shout out to, you know, the regulars, Gail, Bo, Gus, EJ, you know, them doing all their things. And, you know, follow the show and, you know, give it a like, give it a subscribe, give it a review, you know, help them out. It's a good show. But yeah, I can be found on Twitter, JRATM23. And if you want to talk movies or boxing, that's usually what I talk about there. And, you know, I'll do a little plug again for Gus, you know, Corruption in Boxing. He's got his YouTube channel. He did like previews of the cruiserweight fights and then recaps. So, you know, real good stuff. So, you know, he's a smart guy. He knows his stuff. So, you know, give him a follow, give him a subscribe.
Yeah, shout out to Gus, who was in the live chat this evening. Also, shout out to Miss Mrs. Fox on Twitter, longtime fan and supporter of Pound for Pound Box Report. She was in the chat as well. I'll go to you, Daniel, of the Inscriber, for those who want to talk boxing, for those who want to talk the NBA, in particular the Miami Heat. Let the folks know where they can find you.
Yes, you can find me, folks, on Twitter, Ruckus99. You can find my own program with the folks at 4Boxing News at 4boxnews.com and on SoundCloud with Joe and Francis. And check out the latest episode. We did a little bit of an interview with Lexa, a good friend of the program, Gail Farkenthal. As she said, talking about her assignment now for the second time being with main events in the Sergey Kovalev fight.
Indeed. Yeah, she did media work for main events for Kovalev's last fights, doing media work for this upcoming fight with Kovalev. Yeah, so shout out to Gail, shout out to Gus, shout out to Bo, EJ, who else? What You Need,
Nato.
Now to Joe and Francis from 4Boxing. any and everybody who listens to the Pound for Pound Box Report on regular or support the show. Shout out to you all. If you like what you heard this evening, hit that like button, subscribe, check us out on iTunes, leave a review there, and I'll read it on the show. If it's a 5-star review, same thing on SoundCloud. Comment as well on SoundCloud. All comments are welcome. And thanks for everybody who was listening to Live on YouTube. If you want to check um, out yours truly talking boxing, talking music, talking fitness, or whatever. You know what it is. Brother JR on Twitter at Brother JR76. As I said to begin the show, if you want to check out all things regarding Pound for Pound Boxing Report, blog page is the place to go to, p4pboxingreport.wordpress.com. Once again, if you want to check the right of the blog page to find our channels and pages on Twitter, Tumblr, G+, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, G+, YouTube, Facebook. Also, check the right of the blog page to where to listen to the show on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, as well as Mixcloud. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Box Report, we will do a recap of Berchelt and Akobu, and we will do a preview of the doubleheader on. We will do a preview of the ESPN bout on the 16th with Ray Beltran fighting Paulos Moses for the vacant WBO lightweight title, as well as the Showtime doubleheader, Danny Garcia fighting Brandon Rios, the rematch between David Benavidez and Richard Gavril. So for Jacob from Jab Hook, for Daniel the Inscriber, this has been episode 198 of Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I am your host, Michael. We will see you next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night.